Anypoint API Manager in MuleSoft. Now we are considering Anypoint API Manager. Anypoint API Manager is a component of Anypoint platform that enables you to manage, govern, and secure APIs. It leverages the runtime capabilities of API Gateway and Anypoint Service Mesh, both of which enforces policies, collect and track analysis data, manage proxies, provide encryption and authentication, and manage applications. Here you can see what API Manager looks like. To access API Manager, log into Anypoint platform and select API Manager from the main menu. Here in one you can see the environment selector. Anypoint platform enables you to create and manage separate deployment environments for APIs and applications. API Manager displays all environments except design environments. Number 2, navigation menu. In API groups, an API group is an API asset that enables the organizations to publish a group of API instances as a single unit. Automated policies. Policy automation enables security architects and administrators to secure and govern every API running in an environment. Client applications. Applications are external services that consumes APIs. Custom policies. Custom policies are policies that anyone can develop and apply to their APIs with the intention of extending existing functionality or defining new functionality. Data graph administration. Anypoint data graph enables you to unify all the data within your application network in a unified schema. Analytics. API analytics provide insight how your APIs are being used and how they are performing. Number 3, API the add API button enables you to add a new API instance to promote an API from any environment to the current environment. Or to import a configuration zip file that was exported from API Manager. In 4, the environment information button, available only to administrator users, enable administrators to display a dialog with information about the current environment, such as environment credentials. Use environment credentials to provision the Anypoint Service Mesh adapter or to configure Studio to sync with your environment. Number 5, search. Search enables you to search for managed APIs using API search field. Searches are case insensitive. Filter search results by selecting active. Number 6, tracking the registration status of each API, active, inactive, or unregistered. The status of unregistered means that Anypoint platform has never tracked the endpoint for this API version. Either you have entered a URL for an API or proxy that hasn't yet communicated with the platform, or you have declared an endpoint that is hosted somewhere other than an API gateway, or and need to proxy that endpoint so that the platform can track it. The endpoint must have a tracking registration status of active for governance policies and SLA tiers to function. SLA tiers to function. Now 7, the name of each API. Clicking the API names navigate you to the API settings view, where you manage the following alerts, contracts, policies, SLA tiers. 8, percentage of API requests that resulted in errors. If no data is displayed, automatic monitoring has not been enabled for the API. 9, the total number of API requests in the past 24 hours. If no data is displayed, automatic monitoring has not been enabled for the API. Number 10, the number of contracted client applications for each API. Here you can see API administrator sandbox and sandbox API administration, API groups, automated policies, client applications, custom policies, data graph administration, analytics. In the main, here you can see the status, API name, label, version, instance, error rate, total request, client application, and creation date. Here you can see API gateway capabilities. The runtime, the Mule runtime includes an embedded API gateway. Using this gateway, any user can, for example, apply a basic authentication policy on top of a Mule application, enrich an incoming and outgoing messages, or add any other complex capability to an API without having to write any code. And overall API gateway allows you to add a dedicated orchestration layer here on top of your backend APIs and services to help you separate orchestration from implementation concerns. You can leverage the governance capabilities of API manager to apply, among other capabilities, throttling, security, caching, and logging to your APIs. Here you can see API manager is connected to a Anypoint runtime manager agent. Governance enforce is passed from API manager to Anypoint runtime manager agent. In Mule runtime engine, you can see the API gateway is there, and backend APIs here, and you can see here orchestration layer and implementation layer. Clients are connected through API gateway here. actually clients interacts with API gateway, and API gateway interacts with backend API, and endpoint is interact between clients and API gateway here. Here you can see Anypoint service mesh architecture. Anypoint service mesh enables you to extend your microservices network by including your non-MuleSoft applications into the platform. Platform is where you can then manage and secure your application network, including your non-Mule application seamlessly from a single pane. Your non-MuleSoft microservices might be written using different languages and platforms, or might be deployed in different environments. To alleviate issues arising from differences in these microservices, Anypoint Service Mesh ensures the following application management advantages: provides resilient service-to-service communication using zero trust policies to handle traffic control, fault tolerance, and load balancing. Extends MuleSoft API management capabilities to any non-Mule service with policies, security, and analytics all applied directly from Anypoint platform. Amplifies reuse of services with discovery of non-Mule services within Exchange available for use in future projects. Here, Anypoint Service Mesh architecture. Anypoint Service Mesh is an independent architecture layer encapsulated in Kubernetes or Red Hat OpenShift cluster. In the Anypoint Service Mesh architecture, instead of services directly communicating with one another, a sidecar proxy is used to perform the same job. The sidecar proxy enables you to bring your existing non-Mule microservices from the Kubernetes cluster as API into Anypoint platform. You can manage these APIs within API Designer, API Manager, and Exchange. Additionally, you can monitor the health of your APIs using API Analytics. Because of the mixer component is deprecated in Istio version 1.5 and later, the authorization mechanism aspect of the mixer is now implemented by leveraging Anypoint Service Mesh envoy filters. With the envoy filter, requests are sent directly to the adapter, thereby minimizing additional processing. As illustrated in this diagram, at the top of the architecture is Anypoint platform, which brings complete lifecycle API management capabilities to the microservices built with Mule runtime engine. Mule. These Mule instances might be deployed within Cloud Hub or Runtime Fabric at your location. Istio, which is installed on a Kubernetes cluster, uses Envoy to manage services by using a sidecar proxy. The sidecar is responsible for any communication with your service and resides within the same container as that service. With Anypoint Service Mesh enabled, you can continue to use Istio shows native policies for traffic control and security. The MuleSoft adapter connects components to Anypoint platform. Along with the broker, the adapter enables all services that are managed by the mesh to share metadata, which in turn enables your existing microservices in the Kubernetes cluster to be recognized as APIs by Anypoint platform. After services are discovered, Anypoint Exchange uses the metadata to automatically discover and create APIs, HTTP, REST or SOAP for each service. These APIs can then be managed within API Manager. Similarly, Anypoint monitoring uses the metadata to get information from the sidecar proxy and makes it available for API analytics. Here you can see Mule applications. Under that you can see Cloud Hub and Runtime Fabric. You can see Mule apps are in Cloud Hub and Mule apps are in Runtime Fabric. And these applications, Mule applications connected to Anypoint platform. And here you can see Kubernetes cluster or Red Hat OpenShift. You can see here Issue under that, and under Issue you can see Mule adapter, and here you can see service A is connected to sidecar proxy and service B is connected to sidecar proxy, and sidecar proxies are interacting each other, and Kubernetes cluster Red Hat OpenShift is connected to Anypoint platform. API-led connectivity for microservices. You can see discover, manage, and secure inside API platform, and external and internal and external APIs are APIs are on top of Anypoint platform here. This is related. We can consider this as an example. Add a new API, adding an API instance. After you have created an API using Design Center or any other application, you can then manage that API in API Manager by adding an API instance. There are three options for adding API instance. Add a new API, like here. Select this option to add a complete new instance of an API, or promote API from environment, and import API from a zip file. Here we are considering add a new API. Step 1, log onto Anypoint platform. Step 2, in the navigation bar or the Anypoint platform page, click API Manager. Step 3, click Add API and select Add New API. Step 4, select and configure your runtime from the following options. API Flex Gateway. Select Flex Gateway for any APIs that need a flexible, performant API gateway that will work with distributed and microservices environment and fit into your CI/CD environment. Choose the connected Flex Gateway you have installed and registered from the list under the Select Gateway. Note, if you do not see a Flex Gateway listed, or you see a Flex Gateway but its status is disconnected, go for documentation related to install Flex Gateway or register and run in connected mode for more information. Mule Gateway. Select the Mule Gateway if you have an API on Mule runtime that need an API gateway to manage, observe, and secure your APIs. Select proxy type from the following options. Connect to existing application basic endpoint. Use this option directly interact with your Mule runtime engine Mule application where your application is configured with API gateway auto discovery. Select the Mule version. Next point, deploy a proxy application. Use this option to interact by proxy with an application, either because it is Mule application not configured with API gateway auto discovery, or because it is not a Mule application. Here select target type from the following options. Cloud Hub. Select Cloud Hub if you want to use the Mule runtime hosted on the cloud by MuleSoft. The Cloud Hub proxy includes a CPU with 0.1 version vCause and a memory of 500 MB by default. Select the runtime version, enter a proxy app name. Option 2 is next option, hybrid. Select hybrid if you have a Mule runtime running on an on-premises server that you want to use. Note, if you are running an API with self-managed server, use classic API creation flows to manage your API. Select target from the list or click add server. Enter a proxy app name. Service mesh. Select service mesh to extend Anypoint platform API management capabilities to your Istio service mesh through the endpoint of a Mule adapter. Note, after adding the API on Anypoint platform, you will need to bind it to a service using the Anypoint service mesh client. Click next. 6. Select an API from the following two options. Click select API from Exchange if you have an API shared with you through Exchange that you want to manage. Step 1. Click the API from the list under select API. You can search for a specific API if needed. Update. Step 2. Update asset type, API version and asset version if needed. Point 2. Next point, click create new API. Enter a name for step 1. Enter a name for the new API asset. Step 2. Select the asset type from the following option. REST API. Select REST API if you have an RAML or OAS API definition file you want to include for your asset. Upload either RAML or OAS file for your REST API. HTTP API. Select HTTP API if you do not have an API definition file you want to include your asset. SOAP API. Select SOAP API if you have a WSDL API definition file or an external link to the file. Upload the WSDL file for your SOAP API or add the link to the file. This option is not available for Flex Gateway runtime at this time. Step 3. Optionally, you can add an asset ID and customize the version or API version details by clicking Advanced. Step 7. Click Next. Step 8. Configure the endpoint and other settings. Enter the implementation URI for this API. The implementation URI is the URL to access the proxy or the API. For example, you can use the URL of your API asset in Exchange. This is the only required field. Next point, update the other fields if needed. Step 9, click Next. Step 10, review your selections. You can edit search section if necessary. Step 11, if you are ready to deploy, click Save and Deploy. Otherwise, you can select Save to save the API instance and deploy it at a later time. With related to configure an API instance on Flex Gateway options, we can consider the field name implementation URI, the URL to access for the proxy or the API, it must end with a forward slash. This is a required one. And notes, for example, you can use the URL of your API asset in Exchange. As an array example, we can consider this one: entitlement required. Account is not entitled to use API manager. Contact your organization administrator for more details.